written and published. So let me welcome Mr. Peter Mukerjea, who's an author, is a former CEO of Star India, and built Star India to a level from where it could take a leap. So welcome, Peter. Today we're talking to you about your book, Starstruck. So clearly for our viewers, if they haven't picked up the book, they can. It's called Peter Mukerjea's writing Starstruck: Confessions of a TV Executive. First of all, Peter, let me start by asking you, how have been the last 12 months for you, both personally and professionally?
Well, Annurag, before I say anything, let me just first of all do what I really want to do, which is to say thank you very much for having me here, giving me an opportunity to talk to you and to talk to all of your, your followers. And it is really a pleasure to be able to be back on Exchange for Media after such a long time. And it is wonderful, a great feeling that I'm experiencing. So thank you for that. Your question was, how have the last 12 months been? Well, to be honest with you, the last 12 months have been remarkable. In many ways, it's been very busy writing and finishing and getting all the the tidying up that's required before a book gets published. But the people at Westland have been fantastic, Deepthi in particular, and Shweta at the marketing end of the spectrum have been absolutely fabulous. So, and of course, without their help and inputs, the book would not have been, the way it is today. It would have been a lot less, credible. I think they've really put a lot of time and effort into it. But the last 12 months, from my point of view, have been hectic, partly because of the book, but also despite the lockdown that's everyone's experience. It really has been a time for introspection, to be able to kind of realize the value of being at home, despite being in a lockdown mode. For me, it's been particularly so because it's been a cathartic experience for me. I've been able to catch up with some friends of mine in the recent past once the lockdown has kind of eased up. But apart from all of that, it's been a time for, as I said, introspection, but also a lot of fresh thinking. And I think some of that is reflected in the sort of latter part of the book as well.
Fantastic. Now, Peter, let me go back to, you studied business management, right? Of course, you went to Doon School, you went to Hertford College in London. Let's come straight to the book. When you talk of Confessions of a TV Executive, in your book, you write that, when you took over Star TV, you were given a team of very young, relatively inexperienced executives. And you write in the book that we were operating with a Johnny English approach. And basically you were saying that, you had no fear, you had no danger, you knew nothing. So give us a sense of what do you mean when you say that? Elaborate on it.
Well, let me tell you, I think, first of all, just to kind of rephrase given a team, I don't think I was given much of a team, to be honest. When I got here, there were a couple of people. And they were excellent people, actually, in my scheme of things at the time. One, of course, was Yash Khanna. One was Raj Kamath, and Raj Nayak. Megha Tata, then she was Monica. Literally what I would call a fairly motley crew. And so, the early days was really spent in terms of trying to make that and build that team out as far as possible, to build it out with credible people, passionate people who were gutsy, who were daring. And it wasn't necessarily all about, somebody who had to have a business management degree or an MBA or anything of the sort. Of course, they had to be educated and they had to be had to have a good wherewithal to life. Had to be people who played by the rules and were really, really hardworking. And for them, time was not something that they would necessarily be looking at on a daily basis. They were just committed to what they had to do. And I think that really is what was the sort of basic composition of the team. But I think, the second part of what you said, which is to kind of bringing a set of people together at a point in time was, crucial, because we were, quite honestly, and we were a foreign company. We were in English as a language, as a service. We had competitors who were in Hindi, and for us it was nothing but an uphill struggle. So when viewers today watch some of the star channels, many of them, I think, will probably forget, if they knew at all, what it was like in the very early days of this business and how it was at that point transformed. So it was done with extraordinary amount of hard work by the people that were there at the company at the time, and following that, when I was appointed as chief executive, then I think we were able to kind of really put the finishing touches to that team and expand it in different directions, in programming, distribution, and so on and so on. I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Okay, Peter, one of the chapters, the second chapter in the book is changing people is better than changing people. And really the media business is about people. So why don't you give us a glimpse of what's in the chapter and what are you trying to say?
That's a quote which I've credited to Larry Summers, who used to be the head of Harvard Business School and an eminent politician in the United States many years ago. But I heard him say this at a conference, and he was, it was a fascinating term which I'd never heard before. So in the coffee break, I went and spent 5 minutes trying to get his attention and have a chat with him about it. And really what occurred to me at that point was that, changing people is better than changing people. Now you can read it any which way you like, and that's what makes it an interesting phrase, right? And for us, it was not about changing people's habits. It was about changing people if they were not, cut out for a particular task at hand. And I think that's something that we did right at the very beginning. And then once we put that team together, then it remained pretty much untouched and unscathed all the way through till the time that I actually left in the late 2000s. But I think that particular chapter is very much about people's skills, how to manage people, how to kind of make sure that you get the best out of them. And I think obviously you've got to read the book in its entirety to be able to get a sense of, the today, the past, and hopefully a little bit about what's likely to come up in the future.
Fantastic, Peter. Now, in the forward, you talk about successes and failures are part of life. And while success is good, I believe failure is great. And you quote Rupert Murdoch there, and you said, Rupert Murdoch once told you, don't ever miss the opportunity to make the most of a crisis. And you then go on to thank James and News Corp for giving you the opportunity to be able to take Star at that point and make something out of Star India's business. So if you had to say, what was the high point of your innings at Star India, what would that be?
It's a very tough question. There were lots of highs, and there were a few lows as well. But I think there were lots of highs, and it would be very hard to kind of pinpoint one unique high point. But I think if I was pushed to the wall on that one, I would have to say that the day we hit 50 out of 50 programs in the top listings of Hindi general entertainment certainly has to be for me, a particularly memorable milestone moment. I think I would go as far as saying it was probably a life-changing moment, not just for me, but for all the people that worked at Star at the time. Because none of this happens with, it's not an individual effort. This is entirely about teamwork. And whosoever is the person that happens to be, leading that team or leading one of the teams that is responsible for making things happen there, I think it's a great moment in that person's life. And for me, that was without doubt. I think, you know, 50 out of 50 hasn't happened before, hasn't happened since, and I would say, look, unlikely to happen for quite some time yet, because the market has changed, the dynamics are different, and so high point wise, yeah, 50 out of 50 without doubt.
Okay, and what would you say about you roped in Amitabh Bachchan for KBC, and that was itself a very big success. You suddenly the channel started looking good. The channel had a big driver, and you started taking big bets. I remember the week you hit 50 out of 50. I know we did a piece on Exchange Media, so on and so forth. But to me, the Kaun Banega Crorepati and the way it panned out on Star after some other not so successful starts was also a very big milestone. Would you agree?
Yes, of course. Look, I think, it was a very big milestone without doubt. But I think what was significant for us at the time was not just KBC. I think KBC was certainly one of the main milestones or major milestones in that journey. But it was also about, our programming team feeling confident with the lineup of programming that they had, which was following KBC, in order to be able to then, continue that, the opportunity that the battering ram of KBC provided to the other shows that followed. And had it not been for KBC, maybe the others wouldn't have performed as well, right? And certainly if it wasn't a combination of all of the shows in prime time that delivered that 50 out of 50, then I think, the overall performance of the channel would not have been as astounding for us and for the marketplace as it was. So without doubt, I think, the placing of bets is something I think one has to do on a regular basis. You don't really think about it too much when you're at the table, so to speak. You go forward with the best intent, and you always put your best foot forward. So we were hoping that it would work. We had no idea that it would or it wouldn't. As you say, we had experimented with a variety of things before that. My predecessor, Mr. Ratikant Basu, who had initiated this entire move into what we used to call localization at the time. And as part of that exercise, he had, introduced Hindi programming, which he could get at relatively short notice because, programs take time to produce and put together and get on air. So he was able to get his hands on some of the content that was available in the marketplace. Not a great deal, but we got some. Some of it, was reasonable success. Some was not so successful, but overall, our push into localization started at that point. I was fortunate that some of those experimental aspects had been taken care of prior to my, sitting on the saddle. And had it not been for that, maybe I would have felt the same amount of pressure that, my predecessor felt in terms of going down the route of trying dubbing, trying to sort of patch together content that came from here and there and everywhere, and not having a clear-cut kind of strategy in place to say, look, now we can go ahead and do 100% Hindi content. We were restricted from a legal point of view. We had restrictions from our partners, and I think all of those things had to be taken into account. And in many ways, as I say, I think I was very fortunate that some of those had already been done before I got there, so that I didn't have to go through those tunnels myself. I was out in the open. We were able to play, and we had all the resources at our disposal at that point. We weren't restricted in any particular way. So I think big bets possibly, but as I say, those are things you do on a daily basis, and you don't stop because you have to place a big bet. I think I think placing big bets is is an exciting part of the role.
Yeah, and I'll take some of the chapters. I want the viewers and readers to kind of get a glimpse in the book, and so I'm sticking to the book. In the chapter 8 in the book, you talk about winners have parties, losers have meetings, and you, of course, attribute that to Gary Davey, and you talk about how on a lazy day in March 1999 you were lounging about at your home with your brother Gautam. And why don't you tell that story?
Well, it's a lovely story, and it kind of takes me down memory lane very nicely, because it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting there having had my Sunday preferred lunch, which was some nice Bengali cuisine of fish and some kind of rice, and my we didn't have mobiles at that particular point in time, and or maybe we did, but one of my phones rang, and I remember answering it, and there was Gary on the phone, and he said, "Mukers, we got a minute? Can I speak to you?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And he went on to tell me that, look, he had something in mind which he wanted me to do, and would I consider doing it? And it was a question which said, this is what we have in mind, this is what we want to do. Are you up for it? And really, it was a question of, one of my favorite sayings is the Pope Catholic, because the answer to that is a resounding yes. And without battering an eyelid or missing a heartbeat, I was going to tell him, then I said, look, hold on, I'll call you back, just to kind of get my breath and make sure that I wasn't kind of in some form of cuckoo land and hearing things. So I had to kind of sit down. I had to go and have a quick chat with my brother Gautam, and say, look, this is the call I just had, and I better call him back right now, because he'd be waiting for my response. So I called him back, and of course, as I say, it was a resounding yes. And for me, that was I think a exciting moment, but also incredibly frightening, because it was a business that was really in a fair amount of trouble, as the channel was at that particular point in time. We had tried numerous things, wasn't working. We were not sure whether the levels of investment would continue. We were on shaky ground, put it that way. And to take on a business at that point was always going to be a challenge, and B, a risk. But I think we were all wired differently in those days. So we say, absolutely, yes, definitely, let's go for it. And I remember telling Gary, look, I'm going to need an awful lot of help from you. And somewhere in that conversation, I remember him telling me that, winners have parties, losers have meetings. And for me, that has always stuck. And I've used it time and again. And I think it kind of resonates with people a fair amount even today.
Fantastic. In the chapter 6, you quote Rupert Murdoch, and you say, when you are a catalyst for change, you make enemies. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud of the one I've got. This is a quote from Rupert Murdoch. Now, give us a sense of this chapter and what you say in this chapter.
Well, the quote, in a way, sums up a lot of what's in it. And as you're progressing into a sort of territory where you are taking on your competitors in a meaningful kind of way, then you do run up against people who want to try and slow you down or pull you down. And I think in India we have in many cases we have a bit of a crab mentality. So if you see somebody doing well, you tend to kind of, rather than give that person a helping hand and pull them up, you tend to kind of drag them down. And I think I got a sense that some of that was happening to us in different quarters. And I think largely because we were a foreign company. And Rupert, for all his sins, was a maverick in lots of parts of the world. And I think some of our competitors at that particular point in time in India were a bit nervous of what he might do, whether he would get into print, whether he would do things with television, whether it was going to be introducing pay services, direct to home, all of those things were kind of on the agenda. But from a competitor point of view, we were, in a situation where we did have a fair amount of, I would say, stress that we needed to deal with in addition to the regular day-to-day management of a company. So a fair amount of management time in terms of number of hours in the day was gobbled up in really addressing those kinds of issues, which I think is a bit sad, because had we had a bit more time to be able to, not have to worry about those kind of issues, then, maybe things would have been even better for us.
Okay. Now, let me ask you 2-3 questions which are a little broader than your book, and then we'll come back to the book again. One is, today, Star India is part of Disney, right? Also, the environment has changed. OTTs become the biggest driver of content consumption and also content creation, right? So tell me, when you see Star India from outside, or Disney India, if I may call, what is it that you see?
Well, sadly, I got to say this and be candid about it, because I actually don't watch very much of, Star channels currently. The ones I really like are not necessarily available everywhere, and I think the combination that Star and Disney has is extremely powerful, both in terms of content, in terms of brand, in terms of following, and the services that they offer are extraordinary. And I see no reason why they should not be, complete market leaders and in time to come. What level of service and what area of service they decide to kind of venture into, whether it's just sticking with OTT or whether it's going into a whole range of other things, is something that time will tell. But I also happen to believe that, there are some other big players in the market, in the overall universe at the moment, not just in India. And some of these people have got deep pockets, and it's, quite likely that in the next perhaps 12, maybe 18 months, it wouldn't be surprising if, companies like Disney, Star are, potential targets for some of the even bigger players like Apple and Google and Facebook and so on. And I think that's something that they need to be thinking about, I would think. Which they
Peter, in fact, Peter, just to accept your thought and build on it, when Murdoch decided to sell it and he made the first announcement, he basically said to be able to deal with Facebook, Google, and Amazon, it would be necessary to do this Disney tie-up or partnership or sellout, whatever you want to call it. And he basically echoed your line of thought, saying to be able to take on these bigger players, we need to be together with other players, and we need to have size and scale to be able to take them on. So clearly, what you're saying is on, I'm sure, everyone's mind, and every media executive thinks about this all the time. I also want to ask you, post you left Star India did well, got into sports programming. Now, what do you think about sports programming? It is said that Disney, there's speculation that Disney is not very keen on sports programming in India.
I'm sorry, I can't really comment on that. I think sports is a fundamental part of television viewing in this country, whether it's cricket or whether it's people who love motor racing or Premier League football and other sort of events that happen from time to time, tennis, the Grand Slams, etc. And I think for anybody to suggest that Disney is not committed to sports in India, it would be, I think, would either they know an awful lot and they know something that the rest of us don't, or that it is it's inaccurate. I think they are totally committed to it. As a viewer, I think it's terrific that one gets such a wide array of sports content. When I was a star many years ago now, but I happened to be on the board of ESPN Star Sports, and it was no surprise really that at one point, the two companies parted ways, and Star Sports became independent of ESPN, and ESPN became independent of Star. And at that point, you know, again, it was not a surprise when the Disney takeover of Star happened that sports was going to become a key feature, because Star had invested a heck of a lot of money in cricket, which they needed to recover, but also they needed to kind of, present to Disney a fairly well-dressed bride. And I think that's what happened. There was general entertainment and there was sport, which was, um, buttressed by enormous amount of valuable cricket, which Disney had but no choice to take on board. And so, given the commitments that Star would have to the sports bodies that control that particular sport, then I think Disney is definitely committed to sports in India for the future. I doubt it. I doubt if they have any second thoughts about it at the moment.
And Peter, I'm asking you a hypothetical question. If you were to ask to run a OTT company, a new media company, a content company, would you still be interested in running something like that? Because you like building things, you like making bets, you like creating teams, you like making an impact, and you still have a lot left in you. And when one reads the book, it gives a sense that you keep a watch on what's happening around and have a very nuanced point of view. So would you consider building another OTT media content tech play, whatever you want to call it, a new age media platform?
Well, it's thoughts cross your mind from time to time and conversations happen. But I think running one of these companies is not something that is, as appealing to me today as it was when I had the opportunity to run Star, for a variety of reasons. And I won't go into all of them, but I think suffice to say that, I think you need to place your bet on which of these companies you would want to be part of. And you again, with that, you have to look at it in a different way. It's not about the brand today, but it's really what you can take and change and turn that brand into in a short space of time. How are you going to kind of make sure that viewers are resonating with the content that you're putting out? I'm a great believer that I think content regulation for OTT platforms is something that should happen. Now, I'd be very unpopular by amongst a lot of people for me saying that, but I think that in a marketplace like India, where there are diverse issues at work and at play, I think not having any regulatory environment for OTT content is risky and dangerous for the industry. And I think, therefore, until such time as we're a more mature marketplace, I think we need to have that level of controlling and engagement by a regulator.
Okay. And Peter, I want to get back to your book. In the chapter 14, you say optimism, pessimism, fuck that. We're going to make it happen. As God is my bloody witness, I'm hell-bent on making it work. You quote Elon Musk. This is something that Elon Musk said. And you go on to say in the chapter that Rupert knew that we wouldn't get a winner every day that the show was on air, and you're talking about the programming that you brought in. But even if we had a winner every so often, the channel would lift up. I cannot think of any other chief executive other than perhaps Richard Branson of Virgin or Elon Musk of Tesla who could take such a significant decision in such a flash. And again, in the chapter, you talk about how Rupert was seen to be slow in taking decisions and so on and so forth. In the press, he was pretty unpopular about that. So give us a sense of what's in the chapter.
We talked about placing big bets earlier. And part of this has got a reflection on that. And I've used example of Richard Branson and Elon Musk, who are both, you know, frontline warriors in this entire space. As is Rupert in many ways, because, you know, at a time when he was being criticized for not having, you know, sufficient amount of investments in new media, you know, he sent one of his executives into Bangalore and Bombay and Delhi and so on, and, you know, started to buy into internet companies. One of those happened to be India.com, and India was INDYA. And, you know, the volume of investments that happened and the speed with which that happened at that time was extraordinary. Very little of it actually worked, but it was important that it was seen to be, it was seen to be being done. And it was important that at that particular point in time, those investments were being made, so that there was, you know, a level of information being generated which suggested that News Corp and Star were very much involved in looking at new media. And I think new media for a lot of people at that time was really anything which had a .com attached to it. And whereas today it's quite different. So I think if you're talking about the likes of Richard Branson and Elon Musk and Rupert Murdoch, I think they very much are part and parcel of the same mold in different eras. Elon is today, you know, Richard Branson was yesterday, and Rupert, bless him, was, you know, perhaps day before yesterday. And so from that point of view, you know, they are, you know, literally chips off the old block. They are the same. They are, in many ways, their thinking, their view on how to kind of look at a business, how to make it grow, consider consumer behavior patterns are all pretty much the same.
Okay, fantastic. Peter, also, right at the start, you talked about, you know, the leaders or the team that you had. You had Raj Naik, you talked about Rajnath Kamath, you talked about Ms. Tata. You know, when you look at Star India that you nurtured, a lot of people who were part of your core team have gone on to build something valuable post their stints in Star. Whether you look at a Raj Naik, who successfully turned around colors and built it into the powerhouse it is. Of course, you know, Rajesh Kamath, who used to be a marketing manager, and I used to meet him when I used to come and meet you at Star, ran colors before Raj, right? And then you look at Samir, he continues to be doing well. He's doing well at Applause, right? You look at Ms. Tata, she's running Discovery, so on and so forth. So you look at Tarun Katyal, and I can give you many others, you know, who worked with you or were in your team. They've gone on to do so well. And why do you think that has happened? While Z is an institution in the television business in its own right and has produced leaders, you know, Star has produced professional managers and outstanding creators. So why do you think that happened?
Well, I think it's, you know, as a company, we were very fortunate that we had a really good set of people who were, you know, with us at the time. Obviously, they were hired for all the right reasons, in that you know, somewhere within their construct, there was, you know, a sense that all of these people will, you know, they are great performers. They are like, you know, precious gems. They need to be groomed to the extent where their skills are, you know, enabled to flourish. And it's very hard to kind of contain people of that caliber to be, you know, and kept from performing at their best. So, you know, whether it is Mega, whether it is Tarun, whether it's Samir, you know, Sumo, Raj Naik, Rajesh Kamath, you know, these are all, you know, absolute fantastic stallions, right? In a context of a chariot race, like, you know, there's a movie. It's the ability for an organization to be able to harness the to harness the skills that exist in amongst these people, to be able to then, take it to its extreme. Now, why other organizations have not been able to, do that, I think lies in the initial hiring stage. I don't think many of them had hired the right people to begin with, and we were very fortunate that we took pains over hiring the right people, grooming them, leaving them alone, letting them perform, letting them kind of use their own intelligence to really bring about the change that we were looking for, and giving them, a platform to succeed. And that's one of the beauties of the company that I used to work for, News Corp. And I think there was, without doubt, I think a unique without kind of, looking over their shoulder every 2 minutes. So to give them the tools and to allow them to perform. And and one of the things that I remember having written in the book is that at News Corp and also at Star, one didn't get fired for taking a wrong decision. And very often, you only got fired if you didn't take a decision. And I think there's a big difference in the way Star at that time used to function to some of the other companies in the organization, in the industry at that particular point in time, where if you took a wrong decision, you were worried because you might lose your job, and therefore you were risk averse. Whereas in our company and in the company of the people that I worked with, we all had a mutual understanding that you did not get fired for taking a wrong decision. So you weren't risk averse. You would take risks, and if it didn't work, well, that's fine. You try not to make the same mistake a second time, but by and large, you get on with it, you fix it, and you move on. And I think once people get used to that level of freedom in their operating style, then they just carry that forward into whichever organization they happen to go to next. And if you look at it, in amongst the list of people that you mentioned, I think all of them have gone on to perform, brilliantly in the organizations that they're working for now, whether it's Mega at Discovery or Tarun at Z5, Samir Applause, and so on and so on. And I think that came from the fact that we were very lucky to have them in the first place.
Fantastic. Now, you also talk about, of course, a lot of times in the book, there's a mention of the Murdochs. On page 244, you also talk about, I admire James for his clarity of thought and being an intuitively fair person, and then you go on to share some incidents. So give us a sense of why do you say that?
That's a tough one, Anurag. I think you caught me off guard there. But I think the what I remember very clearly of James was that he was very young when he arrived at Star. He was also very, very charming. He was also a great listener. And one of the things that he had going for him at that particular point in time was that he would listen, because he knew that he didn't have that much knowledge about the India marketplace. But what he didn't know about the India marketplace, he was willing to absorb and listen to other people and their views, and then take a calculated decision on whatever it was that happened to be being discussed. And to give you a specific example would be wouldn't be fair, because there were so many of them. And I think what I would say is that one of the benefits that we had by having James as our leader at that time was the fact that, Rupert was his dad. He could literally pick up the phone and talk to his father about either a particular issue or a set of issues that, needed addressing, which perhaps, a normal senior executive would not be able to do, at the drop of a hat, whereas James certainly could. And that was a really unusual benefit that we had which we were able to kind of utilize to our advantage, which none of the other organizations had that opportunity. So Sony, for example, did not have that ability to be able to call somebody and say, look, this is what we need to do. They all needed to follow a certain protocol. And one of the things that we did not have in our company at that time was that we did not necessarily need to follow a given protocol in terms of how one functions. And I think that made a huge difference. It kind of, it speeded up and it turbocharged our decision making immensely, which made a huge difference in terms of speed as well as benefit derived from it.
Fantastic, Peter. I would like to end by asking you two questions. One, as you look ahead in your own personal journey, what is your bucket list? Or you live as every day comes? And second is, when you specifically look at the media businesses in India, what do you think they need to do differently to be able to be relevant, profitable, and build scale? So one personal question, one professional concern.
Oh my goodness! All right, my bucket list would be to, I think, in terms of professional preference, at some level, I'd like to work at or be working in an environment where I'm working with young people, very young people who have a view to, the near future, and are accustomed to a certain way of thinking, which which I would like to learn from. And if there was an opportunity, as in any young startup company, to be an intern, I would love to do that. That, I think, for me would be the a great opportunity, rather than running an organization, which is something you asked me earlier. In terms of media businesses in India, well, look, I think they've got a great future. There is, whether it's in the area of television, whether it's in in even as far as print is concerned. I think broadcast media in India is still a long way from getting saturated, and a long way from seeing a downturn. One of the things that saddens me in the media business in India at the moment is the fact that we have lost sight of delivering quality for the viewer. I think we tend to deliver programming, but fill it to the gunnels with advertising, which is annoying from a viewer point of view. We don't respect the viewer's freedom of choice. And there is no sanctity to the amount of minutes per hour of advertising that a broadcast channel or can carry. And I think if you were to say who was the sponsor of the last India-England cricket match that took place 2 days ago or 3 days ago, I think most people would be hard pressed to say who was the sponsor. Of course, it was Paytm, but the point is, very few sponsors are today recognized for the amount of money that they actually spend, because there are so many of them. And there is no special position given to them. And therefore, I think the more the channels tend to do that, simply to kind of recover revenue, I think the more disservice they do to themselves. So I think they're their own worst enemies in some ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter, for talking to us as Exchange for Media. I want to end by asking you, what's your favorite quote these days? What is it that you say to yourself a lot or say to others?
Well, I don't have a particular quote at this point in time in terms of saying this is what I say to to either to myself or to others. But I do like the quote that you read out from from Elon Musk, and I think that's something that for me has a tremendous amount of resonance even today, and I think will continue for the next few years, because it does say we have to just get on and do it. And I'm not going to repeat it because it has profanity in it, but I think the sense that you get from reading that over and over again, I think is something that is very, very tangible and very real. And I think that's, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you so much, Peter. We wish you luck. Wish your book luck. And let me show the book again. It's called Starstruck: Confessions of a TV Executive. And clearly, it's a book worth a read, especially for everyone who's known Peter and who's interacted with him at Star or during his 3-decade journey, 3+ decade journey. So I would recommend that you read it. And I'm sure it'll give you some insights into how Star India was built. And it'll also give you some insights into how to take big bets. So let me again say that's a book worth reading. Get it fast, read it, and share your book reviews. Okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you once again for talking to us. I'm sure the book will do well. I'm looking forward to your conversation with Raj in the evening. So all the best for that. You and Raj have worked together. So clearly there are much more anecdotes to talk about. And I really look forward to that.
Annurag, thank you very much for having me. As I say, I think that some of the questions that you have posed to me have been, have been tough. It took me by surprise, one or two of them, which is nice. And it's always good from a viewer point of view to kind of have those questions thrown at somebody who's not expecting them. But yes, thank you very much. And I'd say yes. I think the book is something that I feel if people read it, it's generally a fairly easy read. I think most people have said, look, it's very easy to read. I've sat down, I haven't put it down, and I've gone through it in over a weekend. And I think that's the way it's been written. It's a very conversational style of having written it, but I've enjoyed writing it, and I hope you enjoy reading it. So thank you for the opportunity, Annurag. Thank you very much.
Most welcome. God bless you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Bye.